And welcome back into the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. George Bremer, Ryan Hickey here with you. A big podcast, George, because honestly, this is a rare occasion. We both were right for a change, sort of, but because we're not very right, we're going to take it as a win. And that is because on the free agent preview podcast we did last week, check it out on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod, or wherever you get your podcasts at Blue Horseshoe Pod. I predicted that Chris Ballard is going to deviate from the norm and be more aggressive than he has been the previous 6 years as GM of the Colts. You said, George, your biggest free agent concern when it comes to at least re-signing a Colt free agent was Chase McLaughlin, so you prioritize kicker. I said Chris Ballard is going to act different than he has in the past, and we're both half right, so you squish it together. We're taking the win because the biggest news we got on the first day of free agency was that the Colts have made a massive splash. They made free agent history in signing Matt Gay to the biggest free agent contract kicker ever. 4 years, $22.5 million, most money for a kicker over the first 3 year span. George, what is it like to bask in a W?
It's so rare. I don't even know if I can react yet. I mean, it feels so foreign to me. But I honestly, I'm almost meh on this whole deal. Like, I can't even really bring up the real anger because it's a lot of money for a kicker, but it's not like they broke the salary cap. It's still just a little under $6 million. If rumors are true and they're going to make a move with Ryan Kelly, they'll net about $2 million overall in that whole, losing him and gaining the kicker. It's a position they needed to fill. Did they need to do it at this level? That's debatable. I think people that are upset about where Chris Ballard's spending the money and the positions that he is prioritizing, I think that's got merit. That's a valid concern. But at the end of the day, his job is to fill holes on this team, and they went out and got arguably the best kicker on the market. Fifth most accurate kicker in NFL history. He's almost at 93% over the last 2 years. Or 3 years, a little over 93% over the last two, 12 of 15 during that span from 50 yards or more. So it's something they needed. They went out, they filled the hole in that regard. Job well done. We can quibble over the money. We can quibble over the position, but it's so rare that they even are aggressive like this to fill a need that I'm not going to get too worked up over it.
Look, joking aside, I do have two big issues with it. Here's number one. The fact that Chris Ballard is more aggressive in pursuing a kicker than he's been at pursuing a quarterback, I'll be honest, George, does bother me, especially since the news is still so fresh and raw that they were outbid and really reportedly, we'll get to this in a little bit here later on in the podcast, reportedly had no interest in trading up from 4-1. And other teams called the Bears, the Colts were not one of those teams, at least according to early reports. So you have Chris Ballard kind of, again, being passive in the quarterback market and then going all in, going super aggressive for a kicker that I would say right now is not a priority. And then, so that to me is problem number one, is that your aggressiveness, I think, is just in the wrong positional areas. It should be at a quarterback, not pursuing a kicker. Number two, kickers are like relievers. They are very fickle from year to year. So it's like right now, sure, and you just mentioned some of the stats. He is the fifth most accurate kicker of all time. Where the Colts, though, are right now, they are not going to be competitive in 2023. They're not going to be a playoff team in 2023. They're not going to be a Super Bowl contender in 2024 and probably not in 2025. So for almost the entire duration of Matt Gay's contract, sure, you could say, okay, we shored up a position that is of need. But number one, I could say, well, Matt Gay, even though he had some great previous years, we've seen plenty of kickers just fall off a cliff, and there's no guarantee he will continue his past performance now here in Indy. And number two, even if you have a great field goal kicker, if you're not winning many games, what's the point? Like, honestly, what is the point of putting all that resource allocation in the kicking position when if we're talking about, if the Colts can't score and it's 21-6 with a minute left in the fourth quarter, now he hits a 53-yarder and it's 21-9, are we going to go like, congratulations? I guess we got a win. Like, we got the kicker shored up, but nothing else right now is shored up. I just, for at least timeline-wise, I don't see this Colts team being anywhere near winning anytime soon, especially with who the hell knows who's going to be the quarterback. And I just don't think kicker right now is a priority, especially when, again, you're shelling out record-breaking free agent money for a kicker.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that. I really like the bullpen uh analogy because I think that's very apt. You look at these closers, long relievers, short relievers, they're great for a team 1 year, they sign somewhere else and they're not. Kickers tend to be very similar to that. I do think Indy is a good kicking environment, so I think that's helpful here. You're going to kick indoors most of the time, which is always, I would think that that's always something the kicker would prefer, not having the wind and all that to deal with. Yeah, at the end of the day, does it make them a better football team? Probably not. He had a great year last year, and the Rams were what, 4-13 or 5-12,
Wins, right? They're
something in that
picking, or
range.
they're supposed to be picking
Um,
six. So right there with the
yeah,
Colts.
right. So I mean, it's not like the kicker push you over the top. It is the first move though, too, and I think that's always something. It's hard for me early in free agency to judge based off just the first thing. We don't know what else is going to happen. But in and of itself, no, it's not very exciting. Like I said, for me, it's just kind of meh. I mean, it definitely, every argument I've heard against it is a valid argument. I just can't really get up the anger right now. It just doesn't. I guess there's more things I'm worried about with this team.
Well, that's also part of it. And to just give clarity, we are recording on Tuesday afternoon. So right now, the only two moves that have been made in these Colts re-signing players or signing players have been Matt Gay, and then right before that was EJ Speed. So those are the two, as we're recording right now, those are the two moves that have made so far from Chris Ballard. So I'm not saying this free agency period has been a failure by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just more of a math equation where we talked about they have the 15th most cap space in the NFL going into free agency. So it's not like you had a ton of, you're not the Bears with basically $100 million to spend. It's like, oh, sure, what the hell? We'll give 22 to a kicker. We got money to burn here. So you're working with a limited cap. And also, too, again, we talked about Chase McLaughlin. Look, his numbers are a drop-off, right? They're not equal to Matt Gay. He's about a 78% career field goal kicker. Matt Gay is about 10% better than that. And McLaughlin has bounced around a little bit, but it's like the price, it's just like, would you rather pay premium dollar for a great kicker, Matt Gay, or would you spend average to, decent money on a kicker that's been, for the most part, pretty solid? And again, last year, 30-36 for Chase McLaughlin. I had really no complaints. He was definitely an upgrade over Hot Rod and more consistent. So it's like I would have been definitely fine with re-signing Chase McLaughlin, spending a whole hell of a lot of money, maybe half that money that they spent on Matt Gay and Chase McLaughlin. And sure, you're getting a little bit, you're getting lesser of a kicker, don't get me wrong. I just don't think the gap is that drastic where it's worth spending or breaking the bank for a kicker in that aspect to bring him in for a team, again, that's not close to winning. If you're where the Bills are, where the Chiefs are, where the Bengals are, where the Eagles are, different story. We know the Colts are nowhere near that. And to me, that's part of the frustration is just, great, you got a kicker, but I know they're important. I get they're hard to find, right? They are in some ways like quarterbacks where it's very difficult to find a consistent kicker you rely on. But it almost just feels like that is still more of a luxury item than a necessity for a team that, again, is picking fourth with 4 wins and right now still has a lot of holes they need to address other than kicker.
No, there's no doubt. Last year, I think would have made more sense because of the way things were going. You had a sense of urgency with Matt Ryan coming in.
Right.
Belief that it was going to work out there. I guess the reason I'm not that worked up over it now, though, is that I think there's still a lot they can do to move cap around to where it's not much of a hit. It's a big number at a position that's not important. I'm not even going to deny that. You could have saved the money. There's no question about it. But there are things that they can do now that I guess I'm more worked up over Matt Ryan still being on the roster right now than I am over signing a kicker.
Well, that's also fair. And that's going to be a big chunk of money that should be coming off the cap they have to get rid of them by Friday. So it's Tuesday. So there's still time, but you're right. There's no really need to wait. It just feels like a formality more than anything else. Maybe they're waiting for him to retire. I don't know. Would that help the cap any better, Georgia? You know better than me. I'm not really sure. So you're shaking your head no for those that are listening. So I'm with you. But if those moves also, what is funny, we'll go back to kind of maybe end Matt Gay with a little humor here. If they do, again, we expect them to cut Matt Ryan. If you want to, I do think Ryan Kelly will be moved. I think Kenny Moore will be moved. You look now, if those 3 moves are made, you get rid of Matt Ryan, you trade Ryan Kelly, you trade Kenny Moore, you're going to have Matt Gay at $22.5 million, the 6th biggest contract on this team. It is just, again, when you talk about resource allocation, nothing says Super Bowl, quite like having your kicker be a top 6 earner.
It's really funny. And that's the stat for me that as I was looking at the story, last night, which is, it's always great to be doing an overnight kicker story.
Also true.
That was really awesome. But he was picked 19 spots higher than EJ Speed. That just cracks me up a little bit. When you look at the 2019 draft, he was 145 overall and EJ Speed was 164. So I just thought that was funny. The one thing I do wonder if you could take anything from this, and I kind of wanted to ask you this since it happened last night. Do you in any way, is it any indication at all that maybe they are still leaning more towards a rookie quarterback? You put a little more money into a kicker, you would theoretically have the rookie quarterback during the course of that contract. I don't know. Again, it's big money for a kicker, but it's not big money in NFL standards. So I don't want to make too much of it. I just wonder, is there anything you can take from that maybe leans towards a rookie QB?
I would say in a sense, maybe not so. Like, I get what you're saying. I think you're all right in a way. Like, you can kind of glean that, okay, he's spending big money elsewhere. So maybe, like I said, you're anticipating having at least one cheap contract, and we'll see who the backup is. Maybe, again, that shouldn't break the bank with the guys that are out there. But I think it's that also compared with the fact that they seemingly reportedly were never in on Jimmy G. He goes and signs. Guys like we had Taylor Heineke on Tuesday also sign as well. So if the Colts were, ever since the Panthers traded up from 9-1, thinking about going the veteran, quarterback route again and punting on a quarterback, or maybe, zoning in on Hendon Hooker. So maybe say, okay, we'll get a veteran guy now. And we know Hendon Hooker's going to miss most of maybe all of next year. So we'll kind of take it slow with him and we'll just have this guy play for most of the year. I think they would have been in more on Jimmy G, who didn't get a crazy contract. I think they would have been even on a guy like Taylor Heineke, who 2 years, $20 million signed with the Falcons, who has a lot of starting experience and is one of those hit or miss guys, but he's fun. He's interesting. I think that could have been, especially cost-effective wise, a guy they could have circled it on. But I still think, I still think there's a lot of time, obviously, before we get to the draft. So I think at this point, the Colts have not made up their mind. So I think with that being said, the longer you wait, Jameis Winston's off the market. That was a guy we were mentioning last week as well. He's back with the Saints. I still think the Colts will be kicking a rookie quarterback. I'll get for me, the only question going to be, is it going to be at pick 3, at pick 4, or I pick 35. I think that's more the question. It's definitely more of a rookie quarterback, just when more than if. What about you? Do you feel like you're leaning that way too, or you got a different thought?
No, I'm definitely leaning that way. The only thing that's out there that does make you wonder a little bit is the Lamar situation. Just in that it sort of would line up with the not really talking to Carolina and not, talking to some of these other free agent quarterbacks. And maybe you get a kicker there because you do think Lamar raises the floor of where this team is. If you make a trade for Lamar, maybe now the kicker is the difference between winning a wild card game and not winning it. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there because we don't know. I think the main takeaway I have from the offseason so far, which obviously not a ton has happened, and we've mentioned that, is that the Colts really don't seem to have a real distinct plan again. And that's concerning to me because that was a problem at the end of the year. And it feels that way again now. You didn't have the conviction to move up to number 1. That's clear no matter what else is around there. You didn't have a conviction on a veteran guy to chase him early in free agency. And we'll see, maybe all this time has been spent negotiating behind the scenes with Lamar Jackson. You'll find that out on Wednesday. I don't know. But even that's risky because you could do all this work just for Baltimore to say thank you and match it and keep him. So I don't know. That my biggest takeaway right now is that there doesn't seem to be a coherent plan that's being communicated outside the building. Doesn't have to be. It all really matters how it all turns out. But after the way the season ended, that's a little bit of a concern for me.
I would 100% agree because, again, I think in one sense, it does feel like business as usual, which is a problem. There needed to be more urgency. There needed to be a different tone, a different way you approach it because they've approached the offseason so far this year the same way they've approached the last few years, and it's not worked out. We gave them credit for kind of keeping everything under wraps for the head coaching search. So maybe, like you said, maybe they're uber quiet and they're kind of stealthily stalking Lamar Jackson. Now, quickly because it just kind of happens here in real time, want to bring this up to you. Now, Adam Schefter on his podcast this week reported that he said that the Ravens, the contract they offered Lamar Jackson last year, all the guarantees eventually would have equaled $200 million in guaranteed money. Lamar Jackson is basically saying that's a lie. That's not true. And he tweeted without any context, he tweeted 133, 3 years fully guaranteed, but I need an agent. I'm not sure if that means that's what the Ravens offer was and he denied it. I'm not sure if he's saying that's what he wants. If we're operating under the fact that if Lamar Jackson is basically putting out there, I will take a 3-year, 133 million fully guaranteed deal. Does that change the calculus on if you are the Colts and Chris Ballard of whether you would approach Lamar Jackson and trading for Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I would do it anyway. If that's what he's doing, I would definitely be in it. I've been pretty much from the start on the side of I understand the injury concerns. I understand, the monetary concerns, whether or not the Colts can even get the money up front. But I also understand that this is a chance to add a 26-year-old former MVP at a position that has just killed this team for 5 years now. So for me, I'm all in on it. My concern, as I said, is that you end up doing all this work just for Baltimore to thank you for doing all the work and just re-sign him. And then you've wasted your time. Maybe you could have done other things during that stretch. But I guess if your plan right now is Lamar or the draft, you aren't really losing anything by doing,
right.
By making the swing.
That's like, I think if I'm the Colts, last week, and I've most of the really offseason, I've been out on Lamar Jackson and the Colts trading for him. I will say this short-term deal changes it for me because if that's all Lamar wants, if it's truly, and he's telling the truth, 3 years, 133 fully guaranteed, it's about $44.3 million a season. I love the short-term gamble because I do have big concerns about Lamar Jackson being able to stay healthy. And when you fully guarantee money, he's immovable. So if you sign him to a 5-year deal, Deshaun Watson, 5 years, 230 fully guaranteed-esque, if he can't stay healthy 2 years, like you can't move off him, basically. You are stuck with him. So that's, to me, the length got me nervous. If he wants a short-term deal, I'm all in if I'm Chris Ballard. And also, too, like you said, what's the risk? Right now, there's no other quarterback on the roster. You have basically 6 weeks until the draft. Talk to the Ravens. Maybe you are just doing their legwork, and maybe you make that offer, and the Ravens say, thank you, that's what we're looking for. Boom, we signed Lamar. But it's like no skin off your back because, okay, we'll just go to the draft now. We'll see about Anthony Richardson. We'll see if maybe CJ Stroud can slide. And so it's like you're really hurting any quarterback's feelings because you don't have one right now. So I would say if I'm the Colts, I would use his next 6 weeks to investigate. If that's really what Lamar wants, I'm in. I would give up 2 first-round picks. I would give up the number 4 overall pick. You got to, again, it's on Chris Ballard now to really build this roster in a quicker way because I think, again, especially in a 3-year window, you got to win now. I think the defense for the most part is pretty much there, but you got to get some more offensive pieces, I would say, around him. But I would be in. I would be in if that's a short-term deal for Lamar Jackson, if he's telling the truth. Still a lot going on here, a lot of craziness going on, but I saw that one.
It is lying season.
It is. But that could be for the Colts. Definitely an avenue that maybe is more explorable and maybe more realistic than it was this time last week. That's for sure. Okay, so quickly before we wrap up, George, because we got a quick pod here, just a little bit more of the fallout from losing out on the number 1 overall pick. Now, at least I'll speak for myself. The emotions have kind of subsided a little bit here. Two quick things I want to run by you. Number 1, there's multiple reports, some from Jordan Schultz, some from Albert Breer, that basically the Colts were never involved. You had the 2 teams that called the Bears before the Panthers and the Bears ultimately agreed to a move. He's reporting, Jordan Schultz, that is that the Texans and the Raiders were 2 teams that made serious offers about the number 1 overall pick. But the fact that, they said, no, obviously we know that the Panthers move is better. You have Zach Kiefer saying that basically the Colts had no interest in moving up in part because they did not view any of these quarterbacks as a Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence in the draft. And Albert Breer was saying that from what he heard, if you were a team in the top 5, obviously the Colts are, the price would have been 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. If that's the case, if we have all 3 of those ports now merged together, do you still think it's a mistake for the Colts in not trading up to number 1?
Yeah, I mean, I would have done it. I think I was pretty clear about that. I would have gone up. I would have gotten Bryce Young. I mean, I'll be specific about who I would have gone for. I would have gone up and I would have got Bryce Young. And I would have bet on him being that guy. Now, that could be the wrong move. I think that's something that we've been clear about. That's how we felt. And that's where we were really from, I don't know, November at least, on. We've been in that role. Certainly from the moment the Texans won that game at the end of the year, we've been on this train. But I'm not sitting. I'm not. If I was a soothsayer and I knew which of these quarterbacks was gonna be the best quarterback, I probably would be working for an NFL team right now, and I wouldn't be,
That's true.
making peanuts. So it could be. I could be wrong. I'm not saying that's out of the realm of possibility, but that's the move that I would have made. There are other moves that I think could work out for this team. I mean, if you're looking at the Lamar Jackson standpoint, can't you build an offense similar to that? Take your chances with Anthony Richardson and see how that works for you. I've been for a while, probably the whole year, I've been in on Hendon Hooker and saying, hey, if he's there at 35, that's a good option. There's risk because of the injury, but I think there's a chance he's the best quarterback in this draft. And I think that's what's interesting. I think that's why ultimately Chris Ballard didn't make the move is, well, you don't know any one of these guys could end up 5 years from now being the best guy from this quarterback class. The reason I don't like it is that it feels too much like what they've done in the past. It's taking what they did in free agency, just waiting it out. We'll just take whoever's left and transferring that to the draft. And it hasn't worked in free agency. I wouldn't have gone the same route in the draft. Doesn't mean it won't work, though. I guess that's the key to me. Doesn't mean they won't still end up feeling good about what they did. I just would have taken it into my own hands.
Now, you know me, and we're on the same page here. I think personally, Bryce Young's in the same category as Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. I think he'll develop into that quarterback. So again, for me, I would have identified that and I would have made the move, especially if Albert Breer's report is right. And it's 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks for the Bears to go, or for the Colts to go from 4 to 1. I would have done it in a second. But I will say, and we've talked about this a bunch before, if you don't love any of these quarterbacks, you don't make a move just for the sake of making a move. We want a quarterback. Every fan wants the Colts to draft a quarterback. If you are Chris Ballard and you are truly looking at these 4 guys and saying, you know what, there's no one that we think is absolutely worth it. There's no one that jumps out as a must-have franchise guy that we think will be here for the next decade. We don't see it. And there are plenty of classes. There doesn't have to be one standout guy each draft. That's also a misnomer. There are plenty of quarterback draft classes. Just go back to last year that are not that overwhelming or don't have that many great players in it. Again, I would disagree. I think there is at least one in this year's draft class. But if you're Chris Ballard and you don't feel that way, and you at least have a similar feeling from Shane Steichen as well in his early breakdown of the quarterbacks, then you don't make the move. You don't give up draft capital to take a chance, take a risk, and basically grab a lottery ticket. Because anytime you basically take blindly to take a chance on a quarterback, it never works out. So I can't get that upset if Zach Kiefer's report is right and Chris Ballard looked at all the Colts quarterback options, said, nothing's really jumping out so far for me. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. I can't kill him for it. I can't argue with that mindset.
I'm with you.
Very frustrating.
Because it does, and that's the thing. You can argue with the evaluation, and we'll see if that's right or wrong. Once it's, like I said, in November, we might have a very different feeling about this. But you can't argue with the mindset. I mean, if the evaluation that you made is nobody's worth that spot, then you don't go get it. Real quickly here, because I know it's one of the things we want to discuss. For me, I would rank the outcomes now. For me, number 1 is get Lamar Jackson. That to me is
best case, worst case, best case, Lamar Jackson. Okay.
I would go with that. For me, my second best choice is to go and get Hendon Hooker and pair him with somebody like Will Anderson as my first round pick. Maybe get a defense position thing. And that one takes a lot of risk because I honestly don't know if Chris Ballard survives that one, because you could have a really bad year next year while you're waiting for Hendon Hooker to come along. And third would be Anthony Richardson. And I'm not sure he survives that one either, because Richardson might be the best quarterback in this draft, but I don't think anybody thinks that'll happen next year. It would be down the road. So he might be somewhere else by the time that Anthony Richardson is leading the Colts to Super Bowls. I think those are risky moves. Those are the 3 that I would live with the best. Worst case scenario to me is needing to trade down or just taking Will Levis at 4.
Best case scenario for me, I would say, is CJ Stroud at number 4. Now, we'll see what the Panthers do. If they like Anthony Richardson, I'd say best case scenario, realistically, Richardson goes 1, Bryce Young goes 2. fingers crossed the Cardinals stay there at 3 and you get CJ Stroud at 4. I think you get the second best quarterback in this draft class behind Bryce Young, and you keep all your assets there as well and don't burn any trading up to number 3. And so you get to keep, again, all your picks moving forward here. Worst case scenario, I would say twofold. Either trading up for Will Levis, because if you get a run right now and it's, either Stroud, Young, or Young, Stroud, however it goes 1-2, and you're sitting there at 3, now the Cardinals have a bidding war because the Seahawks are interested in Anthony Richardson, the Raiders maybe are aggressive, and now you're bidding up, and then your pick is Will Levis. That, to me, if you trade assets and get a guy like Will Levis, that is the worst case scenario. Or it's you say, Pat, you have in some form Richardson, Young, Stroud go 1, 2, 3, and now you're sitting there at 4. You don't love Levis, and like I said, you're probably drafting Will Anderson. If there are teams like I need Will Levis, and you trade down if you're the Colts and Chris Ballard, and you do the one thing I thought was no shot in hell of them doing, trading down, and you punt the quarterback decision to next year. That's also worst case because there's no guarantee they'll be high enough to be in a position to draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, and there's also no chance that the teams at the first 2 picks would trade down. Like if you hear everything you hear about Caleb Williams and he's there number 1 next year, well, the team has the number 1 overall pick is not going to make the Bears and trade down. I would say they're probably going to take him. So unless you are the worst team in the NFL, that's a real risk to basically tank the entire season for hoping you get a guy like Caleb Williams of his caliber. So I think it to me is the worst case scenario. If you're sitting there at 4, 3 quarterbacks off the board, it's Will Levis, you don't love him, and now it's like, well, I guess we're going to kick the can down the road to 2024. So that is the early Tuesday edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Really do appreciate you tuning in, and make sure you check us out on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod, or wherever you do get your podcast. We'll be back later in the week. Hopefully, maybe we'll see a few other moves made, George. We should know the destination of Paris Campbell, whether it's back in Indy or somewhere else, and we'll continue to kind of give you all the fallout from free agency and how it does impact the Colts. So have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you later on this week right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.